we bring in the legend that is going to continue to grace us with excellence for years to come. I am so thrilled to tell everybody that Merrill Reese is back with another 3-year deal. Congratulations, my friend. You deserve it.
Thank you. The funny thing, Steve, is there really wasn't any question about it. I just want to keep doing this forever until they remove me with a crane. I don't ever want to go away. It's just that they've never announced these things over the years. Sure, there have been contracts, but they just decided to announce it this time because they were doing a whole day from a remote location, and I was as surprised as anybody that they announced it. But it did get reaction, I'll tell you that. But it's very, very flattering to know that people care.
And they do care, as a matter of fact, because, I mean, I'm in the same boat you are. I mean, hey, we get contracts and nobody knows about it.
Sure.
I mean, I know about it. I signed the darn thing. But the part about, look, they'd have to pry you out of there. Look, you and I sit in similar chairs. I mean, you know, so
sure.
I know when I read that, I'm like, okay, he's talking to me here.
Well, and if you want to know the reason for the 3 years as opposed to 4 years or 2 years or
Right.
5 years, my contract goes along with WIP's
Right.
agreement with the Eagles. So theirs gets up in 2024. I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to re-up and that the Eagles are happy with WIP and the network that we have. So it's always done that way.
All right, so let's get to the part about how much you love this job. What is it about the job, and it's probably a list, that you wake up every day and it's just great to be the play-by-play voice of the Philadelphia Eagles?
You know, it was my dream job when I got over my first obsession. I mean, I always say it was the second greatest job I could have had. The first wasn't very realistic, which I learned by the age of 12, and that was to quarterback the team. So once I got that out of my head, this was the next best thing. But like a lot of us, I grew up wanting to be a play-by-play broadcaster, and I've heard friends and people say, you know, I remember Merrill would come over my house when a game was on the television. He'd be broadcasting it, he'd be pretending, or we'd be playing games in the box ball or whatever, and while we're playing games, Merrill was saying, there's a line drive, and none of that is true. I never did any of that. When I played sports growing up, I played for the joy of playing sports. I played everything, and I loved it. Now, I did have, I don't know if you and I have ever spoken about this, but I did have a mother with a bit of a show business flair. And she was a kindergarten teacher, but to go through college, she had a dancing school. And when I was little, and my sister was little, we were sent around to the normal lessons, singing, dancing, dramatics, all that stuff. And I got hooked up through that with an advertising agency at about the age of 7 or 8. And for the next 3 or 4 years, I did a lot of commercials. I did. There was a Western show in Philadelphia called Six Gun Cinema, and a character named Chuck Wagon Pete. And I used to go there on Friday nights to Channel 3, and they were live commercials. So I memorized the script, and I did commercials with that, and for a peanut butter company, and for a lot of. There was a circus show, and it was called M&M's Candy Carnival, and it began every Sunday morning with me turning to the camera saying, "Hey kids, it's time for M&M's Candy Carnival," and on went the show, and my parents took the $37 check and put it in my college funds. So I did a lot of that as a kid. So I did have a little bit of an inkling about the business rather than just the sport.
There has to be a person or maybe a small group of individuals that, the whole world can say yes or no about you, but the ones that make the decision that end up changing your life because of their decision. who's that person or individuals that looked at you and said, you're going to be our voice of the team, and it changed your life?
Well, that person really was Dean Tyler, who at that time was the. It began about 5 or 6 years before that, because I was at an FM station doing primarily news, and it was kind of a jazz station, but they did news on the hour. And I went to the program director and I said to him, I would really love to do. I think that it would really help the station if we had sports in the morning. See, my shift was noon till 8 doing news, and on the hour. And he said, "Well, this is not a sports station." I said, "Well, I know, but I said a sportscast at 6:05, 7:05, 8:05, and 9:05 would really be a good thing." He said, "Listen, it's not a sports station." I said, "How about if I come in and do those sportscasts for free?" And he said, "Sports might have a place in the morning." the two magic words were "for" and "free."
Yep.
And I came in. Actually, I was single, and I was living in an apartment complex with tennis courts, and I was the teaching pro at the club. I grew up as a tennis player, and I would do the sports till 9, and race back to the courts. This is in the spring and summer, obviously, and give 2 hours of lessons. I charged $7 a half hour. So I gave 4 lessons or 5 lessons, and went back and did news all afternoon, and that led to a call from our former sports information director at Temple, a man by the name of Al Schreier. I don't know if you remember.
I
Al.
know. Oh, I knew Al. Oh, yes.
Al was a wonderful man.
Loved Al.
Everybody
Al.
did. So Al called me and he said, "Listen, Charlie Swift, the sports director of WIP, who was also the play-by-play voice of the Eagles, takes a month vacation in the summer from the month of June, actually middle of June to the middle of July, and WIP is looking for a summer replacement. And call Dean Tyler, and I will make a call telling him to expect a call from you." Well, I never got through to Dean Tyler, but I got through to his secretary, who scheduled me for an audition. And I went in, and I taped an audition, and this was in February, and I didn't hear anything. And the next thing I knew, I figured, well, that's it. I went back to doing my normal stuff. In April, out of the blue, I get another call from WIP, and they said, "Come in, we'd like you to take another audition." So I took another audition and didn't hear anything. Now we get into June, and I know the job is supposed to start like June the 10th, and I had long since given up. And I get a call, and WIP asked me to please come in. And I'm waiting in the lobby, and Charlie Swift walks out and said, "Come here, kid." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Listen, when I'm gone next week, here's where you put my mail. You'll be doing the sports from the newsroom." I said, "What?" He said, "They didn't tell you got the job." They had auditioned over 90 people for that job. Because WIP, when I was going through college, that's where everyone wanted to work. Because, WIP had the highest profit margin of any station in the country. And their morning man, their disc jockey, Ken Garland, owned the market. And Dean Tyler, the program director, had selected me to fill in for Charlie Swift. Wow. So that was how that part started. And I went back to WWDB, and I was willing to give up my full-time job for 1 month at WIP. Wow. And they said, "You don't have to. You can just not do your free sports. Do your sports at WIP, but be here every day and do your news from noon to 8. So I said, "Okay." So now I go back to WIP, but I'm scared to death because I'm in the newsroom to do the sports at a private at a board, equipment, and in the other studio down the hall is the great Ken Garland, who I grew up listening to every morning in our family kitchen. Ken Garland was on the air from the time I was probably 10 years old, And to me, and he was a giant, and I thought, oh my goodness, Ken Garland is going to be listening to me do the sports. Nevertheless, at 6:05, I took a deep breath, and I did 5 minutes of sports, and then read the card that said, it's 10 past 6 on WIP, time for the start of the Ken Garland Show. And I click my microphone shut, and I hear nothing for about, now it seemed like 10 minutes, but it was really no more than 2 seconds. And
Right.
all of a sudden, Ken Garland was on the air, and he said, wow, if I were Charlie Swift, I would hurry home from vacation. And before I left the building, they signed me to do the pre- and post-game Eagles show and the Ed Kayak Coaches show. And woof, the rest is history.
I remember the first day I did play-by-play of anything. It was December 8th, 1977. I was at the Penn State Wilkes-Barre campus, and I did a basketball game. And when it was done, I said, I want to do this the rest of my life.
Oh,
What was your first game that told you I want to do this the rest of my life?
well, that was probably when I was at Temple, and I was doing the. We had a line, Steve, a broadcast line at the Palestra. So at the end of my freshman year, I was named sports director, and got to do all the games. So we had a line at the Palestra. So we didn't just do Temple games; we did all the Big Five games.
Wow.
So I would do a doubleheader Wednesday night, doubleheader Friday night, a doubleheader Saturday night, and if anything was being played there, we would just go down, plug it in, and do it. And one Saturday afternoon, I did a high school playoff triple header, went for a quick pizza, and came back and did a doubleheader that night. I did 5 games. But I knew from the moment that I did my first game ever, that was what I knew going into this thing. I mean, once the football dream, the quarterback dream went away, and I realized that my tennis career wasn't going to take me to Wimbledon, I knew that this is what I wanted. And when I would go out to Franklin Field with my dad to an Eagles game, and they were in Franklin Field by that time, I would look at the field, and I'm probably at that time I'm 12 years old. I would look at the field, and between every play, I would look at the broadcast booth and stare up at Bill Campbell, who was doing the play-by-play, and say, that is where I want to be. That is where I want to be. So I knew that was my dream. Now, people used to laugh at me. I mean, in my high school yearbook, that got a big ha-ha, because it actually it says ambition, and mine is I want to be a play-by-play broadcaster. And, that got a good laugh from a lot of people, because, in high school, in the record book, with the record book as the yearbook when you're graduating, they have the class superlatives. So they have the handsomest guy and girl, and they have the best athlete, they have the class clown, they have the most likely to succeed, the most studious. And I was none of them. If they had a category in my high school for most likely to never be heard from again, I would have been the winner.
Last I checked, you're the one that's got a Super Bowl ring.
I'm the one who, when I come back to a class reunion, all the girls who I didn't have the guts to ask out on a date come up and ask me to pose for a picture for their grandchildren. That's the big treat.
Oh, that's just incredible. It's just so true. It's just so true. Oh, well, I'll tell you what. I could keep going on with this for a long time.
Oh, my goodness, it was fun.
I mean, really.
But
I'll say this.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but on a game day, on an Eagles game day, I wake up as nervous as I was in 1977. Your first game was, you said, December 8th, 1977. Is that right?
Yep, I was in college. Yep.
Well, here's the crazy thing about that date.
Okay.
December 7th, 2077 was the moment that was the morning where I woke up and got a phone call. I was getting ready to go into WWTV, which was then a talk show. It was a talk station, and I was the morning sports anchor. And the phone rang early, and there was a voice on the other end of the phone to tell me that Charlie Swift had died, that he had taken his life. And that was December 7th, 1977. So that was one day before you emerged doing your game. And then I went into the station and did an obituary. And then at 9 o'clock, the phone rang, and it was Dean Tyler telling me that I was doing the play-by-play that Sunday. I had done the color that year. So that Sunday was my first Eagles play-by-play.
Wow.
But I talk about the nervousness that I felt that day when they had a moment of silence and all the players looked up at the broadcast booth and removed their helmets in a moment of silence, and my knees were banging together, and I didn't know if I'd get anything out of my mouth. But fortunately I did. But to this day, I am as nervous on the day of a game as I was 45 years ago, because don't get me wrong, once I'm cued and the game begins, I'm floating as you are, and we're just enjoying the game and doing all the things that we have to do to perform a coherent broadcast. But that day, we have numbers that we memorize during the week, information. I've always felt every week it's like going into a final exam, except in this case I studied. In that case, I usually didn't.
That's because on this, you and I want to study for it. Back then, we didn't want to study for other stuff.
Right. Yeah, communication classes were fine, but would you give me modern world history, and it would be an all-night cram session and hoping something stuck.
Well, I'll tell you what. He and I go back to the days when he was doing St. Joe's and basketball and things like that. Every second, I have cherished our friendship, and it's grown even more so over the years. Thank you so much for the friendship and for being on the show today.
Back at you, Steve. I love listening to you do your play-by-play, and you do a great job.
Well, I'll tell you, if I'm doing anything that's in your class, then I'm appreciative of the compliment. Thank you so much.
You do a terrific job.
You are a Hall of Famer in every aspect, on the air and off the air. Thank you, Merrill, so much for the time today.
Steve, always fun being on with you. I'll talk to you soon.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
The legendary, on the air and off the air, Merrill Reese.